Hello, thank you for joining me today. We're going to be doing a Christmas card in July, maybe with an early start. I'll get all my cards out on time this year. So we're going to be using the Christmas floral stamp set from Concord and Ninth, and we're going to start with some stamping. And since this is such a large and detailed stamp, I'm going to be using my Misty Stamp Positioner tool because I'm stamping on watercolor paper, so I know I'm going to need a couple of impressions to make sure that I get a good clean image. And since we are going to emboss this image, I'm going to use my anti-static powder bag just so we don't have embossing powder clinging to bits of the paper that we don't want it to. And I am using the black VersaFine ink to do my stamping because I do like how black it is. It usually gives a nice crisp line when you do the stamping, and it also embosses very well. And now that we have a good impression, I'm going to wipe off my stamp with just a regular baby wipe just to get most of the ink off so that when I put it away I don't cause a mess. Now it's time to do the actual embossing for this card, and I am going to be using the Simon Says Stamp Clear Fine Detail embossing powder, and I do have my embossing gun already heating up off to the side so that it's already good and hot when I bring it to the paper. So with the heat gun already nice and warmed up, the embossing powder melts more quickly, more evenly, and you also get a lot less warping to your paper. And after we're done with the embossing, we're going to tape down our card panel so that we can do some watercoloring without the paper moving around too much or curling up from the water. Normally I would tape it down to our hardboard, but I do not remember where I put mine at the moment, so we're just going to tape it down to our surface and we're going to keep moving. For the coloring, I am using the Winter Wonderland watercolor brush marker set from Altenew and some Arteza water brushes. For the 3 poinsettias on the front, I'm going to be using 2 colors primarily. I'm going to be using Rouge, which is the lighter red, but not quite a pink, and Ruby Red is the deeper red color for these flowers. And I couldn't quite decide which technique I liked best as far as the coloring result. If I like doing wet on wet, so putting down some water on the petals first before putting down any color, or if I like putting the color down on dry watercolor paper and then using the brush markers to pull the color out and to help blend, or if I just put down the color on dry watercolor paper and then use the other color watercolor markers to help blend out and to pull the color around where I wanted it. And so since obviously a decision had to be made, I decided to do all 3. So I did 1 flower each way, and I think I like just using the color markers without the water brushes the best, which I believe is the last flower that I do. But I'm curious which one you all like the best, so please let me know in the comments below which flower you think turned out the best. For the leaves, I used 2 of the greens in the set. I used Emerald and Mountain Mist. Towards the base of the leaves, where there would be more shadows from the petals of the flowers, I used Emerald, and then I used Mountain Mist to pull the color out towards the tips of the leaves. Did let the watercolor panel sit for maybe about 20 minutes, and then I just used my heat gun to kind of blow some hot air over it and not necessarily at it, just for some added insurance to make sure that the piece was completely dry. And because I struggle making a Christmas card that doesn't have some sort of shiny element to it, we're going to be making an embossed background for our watercolor piece, and we are using the poinsettia background stamp from Simon Says Stamp with Versamark clear embossing ink, and we are going to stamp this a few times because it is such a large and detailed stamp, just to make sure that we have a really good impression so we don't have any gaps in our background. And in between stamping, I do kind of like to hold up the Misty with the panel still in it to see where the light catches and where it doesn't, so I can kind of see where there are potential areas where there isn't a good impression where the embossing powder won't stick. And now for the embossing powder, we're going to be using my favorite gold, which is the Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail Antique Gold Embossing Powder. And my jar is actually probably a third full at this point, so I probably need to go ahead and order another jar, especially before it's time to do the heavy-duty Christmas crafting. And when embossing such a large image, I do like to heat the back of the paper periodically as well as the front while doing the embossing, because I find that kind of helps keep the paper flatter than if I just heated it from one side. And after the embossing powder is nice and smoothly melted, I'm going to take a moment to appreciate how nice and shiny this is, because as previously discussed, I like shiny things. And now that our background is sorted, I did use the matching die set to cut out the image from our watercolor paper, as well as the letters that spell out Christmas out of a gold foil cardstock. And now we're just going to put those letters on top of the stamped image using some tweezers and art glitter glue. Then it's time to put our image on the background, and we're going to attempt to center this as best as we possibly can. I make no promises. I am still me. And we're just going to pop it up a little bit with some foam tape. And I did end up having to stand up so I could look down to get a better view, so that this wasn't obviously offset to one side. And once we're satisfied with that, it's time to build out our sentiment. And we're going to be using some of the accompanying sentiment stamps in the Christmas floral stamp set. And since I haven't stamped these before, I am going to do a couple of test runs with them just so I can get the stamps appropriately conditioned to get a good impression. And one of the things that I like a lot about the accompanying die set for these stamps is that there is a label shaped die, which makes it so much easier for me to cut the sentiments out in a straight label, because honestly that is one of the things I struggle with most, is having a sentiment where one side is maybe slightly crooked or one side's a little bit thinner than the other end, and this just kind of takes a lot of the guesswork and stress out of it. And then we're going to just go along the edges of those sentiment strips with a gold paint marker, just so that the edges kind of don't look so unfinished when they are set on top of the rest of the card. So we're going to go ahead and place the sentiment strips now, and we are going to put some foam tape on the edge of that top sentiment strip just so that it stays level, and that the end that's not over the Christmas floral image piece doesn't kind of sag off to the side, because I do want the edge of that sentiment strip kind of flush with the background. I will say that watching this footage is making me realize I spend an inordinate amount of time deciding where my sentiment strips are going to go, and it can't just be me. It might just be me. Is it just me? Feel free to let me know if it's just me, but I really feel like it's not. So we're going to take this panel and we're going to attach it to a card front, and I am putting a little bit of glue on top of the places where I put the tape runner, just so that I have a little bit of wiggle room before it's firmly attached, just in case that it's a little bit off. And I do use the desk to kind of make sure that I have it aligned against the bottom edge. And because I know if I don't make a coordinating envelope now, it's never going to get made, I took a floral image from that same Christmas floral stamp set, and using an acrylic block and Versamark ink, I just stamped the image on the outside of a schoolhouse red envelope from Simon Says Stamp. And we're using gold glitter embossing powder from Hero Arts, and there isn't a lot of glitter fallout once you've embossed this powder. There maybe a couple of flecks will fall off, but nothing like a glitter disaster that we all live in fear of. And if you've made it this far, thank you so very much. I will leave you with a couple of close-up images of the card, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you.